Carrie is a chilling blend of American graffiti and psycho. It contains scenes so terrifying they can't be shown in this commercial. Carrie, rated R.
Welcome to Roll Credits, a podcast about connections, both in film and in life. I'm Aaron.
I'm Mandy.
In each episode, we aim to explore a cast member, actor, director, or even a concept that ties a set of movies together. We'll talk about the history and the context of the movie and have fun while discussing our own personal opinions. This is an Armbar Studios production. For more information on all of our projects, you can visit armbarstudios.com. It is Saturday, November 9th, and we are launching into our newest arc on Stephen King adaptations. We mentioned concepts. This is a concept. I think this is going to be a really interesting arc as we cover Carrie, Christine, Stand By Me, Misery, The Mangler, and It, also known as It Chapter 1. You'll notice I said November.
It's November.
It is November. We did plan this out with the idea that, we're going to be totally in our schedule in time for October. But honestly, I'm kind of happy it kind of landed this way. It gave us time to really breathe with the Joel Schumacher arc. And, we do have a non-horror Stephen King in that lineup. So we're fine. We did it. Plus, tomorrow, we're going to go see Carrie the musical. Complete coincidence. Absolutely crazy. A lot of coincidences have surrounded this particular movie after we've watched it, which are going to be fun to talk about. But, for those of you who have never seen Carrie, it is the tragic story of the woman of the same name, the girl, Carrie White. She is a late bloomer and bullied girl whose latent psychic abilities come to fruition after puberty. Of course, based on, why else are we doing this? Based on the famous horror author's work, Stephen King. And I'm sure you'll cover this. I do believe this is one of his earliest adaptations.
His earliest adaptation.
The original?
The original, and furthermore, Carrie is his first published book.
No way!
Yeah, he had a few short stories published before this, but this is actually something I wanted to get into. So there are 3 novels that he wrote before this. Mm-hmm. Do you know what they are?
One of them, I believe, was Rage.
Correct.
But he published that under a pseudonym, didn't he?
Yes. All 3 of these ones he published underneath his pseudonym, the fake name of Richard Bachman.
Okay.
So the 3 books published later on were Rage, The Long Walk, and The Running Man.
It's really funny that one of them is The Long Walk. Almost certainly inspired by a movie we watched this year. They Shoot Horses, Don't They? Which is, of course, based on real life. So I'm probably going to have to watch The Long Walk at some point. By the way, did you know that they are, or at least talks have been in place, that they are making a movie adaptation of The Long Walk? So even now we have a new Stephen King adaptation to, I say look forward to, but some people say that The Long Walk might be hard to adapt. So we'll see.
They said the same thing about Gerald's Game, and they managed to do that. So
absolutely. So what is your, before we begin and talk about the history and all this, what is your personal history with Stephen King? Have you read many of his books? Well,
here's the thing, right? I like Stephen King. Mm-hmm. I can't say that I love Stephen King. Not as much as like Clive Barker or some other horror authors that I love. I really liked the original book for The Shining. Mm-hmm. And then I read 4, but I didn't really care for the original It.
Okay.
However, I'll also admit he is arguably the most important name to horror fiction. And I would love to get to talk about both the good and the bad with him. But, we're going to avoid going with his full history with this story.
This is not really... This arc is not a Stephen King biography. No. This is more looking at the interesting ways different filmmakers have kind of inserted shared DNA in all of their films when it comes to adapting his works, because that's the thing that really kind of made us even think about this is like thinking there's a time period where like everyone was doing Stephen King stuff, right? In the 80s.
And even again in the 2010s after the success of It.
Exactly. And you look at that and you're like, man, even though they're all working from this one guy's work, they also feel like they're also inspired by each other when it comes to how these things are produced. And that's kind of the things that we're going to be sort of looking into. In this first episode, this is our baseline, first ever, the one that started it all. So I think it's going to be interesting to be kind of looking at it from that, as Carrie is kind of the vector.
Agreed.
By the way, the only Stephen King book I've ever read in full was Cell, the one where the cell phones turned people evil and technology was bad.
How was that one?
Well, reading it as in 2008, I thought it was stupid but enjoyable until the last act where it all fell apart. It was a really fun thriller with a really dumb gimmick, and then it all completely fell apart at the end. And I don't remember how. It just kind of I don't know, it just ended.
We're probably not going to get into it this episode because I've always felt that Carrie has a strong ending, but I've always felt like Stephen King kind of fumbles his endings majority of the time.
Yeah, fair.
Let's get into more of like how this arc came about, I'd say. We tackled Chris Farley and Joel Schumacher so far, people. For
Kane.
Yes, and Kane. So I guess this is, however you want to look at, consider that like a half arc. Maybe this is 3.5.
Yeah, that's our pilot. So this is our third.
So we wanted a subject for our third arc, and we actually floated around a few possible ideas. We actually almost settled on horror remakes as an idea, and then the last minute idea of Stephen King adaptations just came to mind, and then we were like, sure, yeah, no, that sounds great. We both I think we have interest in Stephen King. There was
we have a mutual friend who absolutely loves Stephen King, and you can ask him anything about any of the books and he will give you all of his thoughts. So every so often I come to him, like whenever I hear something about him, I'm like, hey, is it true that this? And he'll be like, yes, no, yes, here's the exact context and a whole paragraph on it. Thank you, Silas. I love you. Continue.
Bless. Now, and I'll also say, this lineup, you may wonder, well, why isn't this on here? Why isn't that on here? Two reasons. One, we try and set like a hard limit of 6 films, and I think it's impossible to just kind of limit Stephen King into just 6 films for his filmography. There's at least like we could do a whole podcast dedicated to Stephen King adaptations.
Yeah,
He's
absolutely.
done so many.
And there are always more coming, as we talked about.
And also, because of the fact we're doing adaptations, we didn't want to do anything that he has specifically directed or written for. So that took Creepshow out of the equation. Also, Maximum Overdrive fans, I don't know if you exist. Maybe one day you'll have your day. Maybe one day we'll do directed by Stephen King, which will be probably just that one.
Yeah.
Anyways, you want me to get into the history of Carrie?
Yeah, please. Absolutely. I'm already learning things, so let's go for it.
All right. So sources this time include Cinema Fantastique magazine, Florida Weekly, Lion newspaper, Box Office Mojo, King's memoir on writing, and the Helen Marshall article, Snapshot of an Age, the publication of Carrie.
Okay.
Now, there's actually a really good version of this story told on YouTube, by the way, called The History of Carrie the Musical, and it's from Wait in the Wings on YouTube. So I'll try and tell my own version. Obviously, there will be overlap, just because it's telling the same story. Now, it's hard to think of a world where Stephen King is not the first name that came to people's minds when they thought of horror, but we're going back to 1974 here, when Stephen King is an English teacher with a wife and 2 kids. He lives in a double-wide trailer, and he struggles to write short stories for magazines to help pay bills. Now, For a couple of years at this point, his work is regularly published in something called Cavalier magazine. And while doing his laundry one day, he thought back to a job he had as a janitor one summer, and he remembered going to clean the rust out of a girl's locker room when he began to notice just a few differences between the boys' and the girls' locker room. Namely, there would be 2 metal boxes on the girls' locker room that were just full of tampons, and then also chrome U-rings over the shower with pink curtains attached to it, so the girls could shower in their privacy. And that's when the vision of Carrie's opening scene came to mind for him. In a locker room without any curtains, he just imagined a girl getting her first period in the shower and then freaking out as she thinks that she must be hurt or she's going to die. And so she goes to the other girls for help, and then she's pelted with sanitary napkins and tampons.
I mean, it's without going into the movie yet, I mean, it's a shocking scene, extremely, well done in that regard, and, not so untrue to life.
And absolutely just horrible to imagine yourself in that scenario.
Yeah, terrible.
And it's also here where he remembered a Life article about how telekinesis manifested in adolescence at puberty. So suddenly he had a story, one about, in his words, adolescent cruelty and telekinesis.
There you go. You only need those 2 parts.
So, he sits down, he writes 3 pages, and it's trash. Try as he might, he could not connect to the story on any emotional level. Then there was the fact that he knew the story was not going to have any marketing appeal. Cavalier had a very hard limit on how long the story should be. And if he wanted to tell this story the way that it should be told, he felt that it needed to be full length, like novel length. And with how hard that he struggled to make it through those first 3 pages, it did not at all seem feasible at the time. So everything that Stephen had written that day just went straight into the trash bin until it could be emptied and then eventually sent to the dump. Next night, Stephen comes home from his work. His wife Tabitha actually has the 3 pages from Carrie that he had written just in her hands. And it turns out that she had dug them out of the trash, read them, and then just asked Stephen if he could continue so that she could know what happens next.
Oh.
Stephen, he was hesitant. He told her that, truth be told, he just didn't know how to relate to a teen girl, but Tabby offered her input, saying that she really believed that he had something. And Stephen, he still had his doubts, but for the sake of making his wife happy, he agreed and he went back to work on it.
That's nice. Listen, I can relate to this. I'm always annoying you to write more.
It's really sweet. He actually talks about how when he reads books and they start with something like "For My Wife," his first thought is, this person gets it.
That's nice.
So as he forced himself to finish it, he did remember 2 girls that he went to school with who were treated horribly by his other classmates. So one was this pale girl with a pimply face who came from a very devout family. And then the other was this girl who would constantly be teased about wearing the same outfit every day of school. And it was those 2 that helped King at least sympathize with Carrie because, he pitied her. He also put himself in the shoes of the people who bullied her because he was not one of the people who bullied one of the girls, but he had been a bully to a sibling of one of the girls before.
Right. So in a lot of ways, it's sort of like, he's able to kind of envision himself in this situation if just because of kind of the relatability and almost like, I don't want to say it's an apology, but it's just sort of a self-reflection on the uglier parts of yourself.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So he finished his manuscript. He submitted it to the publisher Doubleday, and then he just about forgot about it. Until one day he was at his work grading papers just after lunch, and he was asked to come into the office because his wife was on the line. So King rushed to the office where his wife had excitedly read off a telegram. As the Kings did not have a phone at the time, Doubleday had told King that they were going to publish his book, and they offered him $2,500 advance for it.
Oh, nice.
Yes. So we'd mentioned earlier, Carrie was not actually the first book that King had written, but it was King's first book to be published, and he was happy with the $2,500 advance.
Right. So it's under his own name, you mean? Or
yes.
Okay.
But what happened next was something, that he could never have predicted. Signet had actually contacted Doubleday for the paperback rights to Carrie, and they offered $400,000 for it, with King receiving half of that.
Wow.
Yeah.
So this is a big success. It's crazy to think how quickly this happened. Obviously he had, been doing writing and short stories and, pen name novels for a while, but then all of a sudden, this is how he really got his start, and he did kind of explode. So interesting.
And you know how this situation goes. Usually just all it takes is one person to really look at this stuff in the right light, and then all of a sudden, it sets off a whole chain reaction.
Yeah, absolutely.
So with it, King finally quit his teaching job, and he gave this full-time writer thing a shot. And just as the book began to pick up steam, a friend of Stephen King's actually suggested to another one of their director friends to read the novel. That man happened to be a young Brian De Palma, who immediately called his agents to find out who owned it. Now, the agent managed to find out that several studios were looking at it at the time, so Brian called around to those studios to see if they could persuade them into getting the rights. Then, nothing. Nothing for 6 months. When the rights were eventually sold, it was for just a meager $2,500 for the film rights, a fact that Stephen acknowledged, but he doesn't regret in the least here. Again, exactly the same amount that he got in the first place.
Yeah, for the advance.
For the advance. And I think, given the fact that this almost ended up in the trash, I think he was happy to get anything from it.
Yeah. It's a pretty big success there.
So, 6 months later, Brian was with 20th Century Fox, the same company that he had recently sold his big horror hit to. Give me the name.
Phantom of the Paradise.
Yep. So they had the rights at the time. So he went up to the right people, said, hey, I want to direct this. But they couldn't give him anything until the screenwriter from Texas got back with a draft for the movie.
Okay.
Then nothing again for another 6 whole months. Then Hollywood producer George Litto, who had recently produced the movie De Palma had made called Obsession. It did release the same year as Carrie, but it was made the year prior.
Okay.
He had the script for Carrie. So he actually had the script for Carrie and called up De Palma to tell him that he wanted him to direct the film, which was now sold to the film studio United Artists.
Okay.
And, having been jerked around for the better part of a year on this project, Brian still said yes.
Yeah. I mean, he wanted it, and he was the right pick. We'll talk about that.
And once Brian De Palma was officially signed on, he was given only $1.8 million to direct, which was considered small time for a production like this, even at the time. But Brian made it work. In the lead role, De Palma had a certain actress in mind to play Carrie, one that he couldn't recall with the interview. I think there are a few reports about who it was. But, one person in particular was determined to get in the film and read for every single part. And she was absolutely perfect in screen test. That was Sissy Spacek.
Yes.
Who had actually worked with De Palma as set dresser for him on Phantom of the Paradise before this. Then, as an additional bit of star power for it, the role of Margaret did actually go to legend Piper Laurie, who played the female lead in the role of the Hustler. Mm-hmm. And who was looking to get back into the world of film at the time. So this was kind of a perfect avenue for her.
Oh, that's awesome. I didn't realize that this was kind of her big return. She was amazing, of course.
Absolutely. She is scary at the time. Obviously, 70s, 80s, that whole time frame was just filled with like scary moms. I'm sure we'll get into that.
Yeah, I'm sure.
For what was a small budget, the return was massive. The film wound up making $33.8 million in exchange for its $1.8 million budget, becoming a massive pop culture figure that'd go on to jumpstart Stephen King, Brian De Palma, and Sissy Spacek's careers here. Not to mention the sales of the original Carrie novel made it to the bestsellers list for 14 whole weeks after the release of this film.
Or I should probably read it at some point.
And, you know, I'd go on... It would go on to inspire tributes, an infamous Broadway musical, which we will see, remakes, and sequels if we ever want to touch them, and I don't think we do.
The Rage Carrie 2.
So why did we start off with Carrie of all the Stephen King adaptations? I just don't think there's no better entry point, do you?
No, absolutely not, especially learning, like, how big it was.
He hit the ground running with his first one. Like, this is... like, you're right.
It's still one of the best.
Still one of the best horror films of the 70s. An extremely hard distinction. The fact, again, keep in mind, less than 2 million. And this was an era in which The Exorcist was out when they were doing...
Well, I mean, you look at, you know, you can draw a connecting line from Phantom of the Paradise to Carrie to Suspiria. And those are all right there. Incredible, right?
The 70s were awesome for
The
horror.
70s were pretty freaking awesome. Pretty good.
So anyways, that's all I have on the adaptation here. Yeah, so basically, Stephen King, huge first movie for him. And then, you know, we'll get into where his career picks up after that.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned earlier, I think we're good to get physical, shall we say?
Let's get physical.
Let's get physical, okay. So I mentioned earlier that we've run into some pretty funny coincidences after watching this movie. For example, being invited to a showing of Carrie the musical, and this one. So I want to talk a little bit about the physical release and the best way to watch this movie. We are very blessed that Scream Factory, Shout Factory's horror arm, has released a 4K Blu-ray combo. It is 3 discs, because you get the 4K of the movie, you get the Blu-ray of the movie, and then you get a whole extra disc of special features. And this was rated 5 out of 5 from Blu-ray.com. It also came with a steelbook. And this is kind of the funny thing, is that for a while, we would go to Best Buy back when they had discs, RIP.
R.I.P.
And I remember they would often have Shout Factory releases and Arrow and a lot of really cool boutiques and movies we hadn't heard of. Just lots of really neat releases. They were a great way to kind of check up on what was releasing. And I remember seeing the steelbook for the Carrie 4K combo. And every single time we saw it, we were like, man, that is a beautiful release. I wish we liked the movie more. But, you know, we didn't in our heads, like it as enough to want to buy the movie, because it was just I mean, it was good, but it wasn't reaching out to us.
For the shelf space and also our budgets.
Yeah, it
was one of those things where, you can like a movie, but that doesn't mean you want to own every single movie.
Exactly. We're not hoarders over here. We were,
allegedly.
Some people would think we are. We're not. Trust me. But just the other day, we went to the mall and went to the Suncoast Video, and right there on the shelf, discounted, by the way, $30, so not bad, was this Carrie release, the same one that we had passed by over and over again all those years ago. And we've since rewatched the movie and very much wanted to own it. So thank you for some serendipity, because let me just break down. I've told you it has the 3 discs. Like I said, it has a glowing review on Blu-ray.com. Absolutely 5 out of 5, considered one of the best 4K releases ever. Which is holy crap, right? Great movie, great transfer, great soundtrack. And like I said, you get the film, you get a gallery of trailers, and you get commentary, and you get a 30-minute featurette about the featuring screenwriter Lawrence Cohen, who is not that Larry Cohen.
Not that. It's funny. I
we thought it was.
I wrote down that exact note there.
Yeah. But you also have a 15-minute interview / featurette on the photography from the director of photography, Mario Tosi. You have the editor, Paul Hirsch, breaking it down. That's another 30 minutes. You have the casting director doing another 15-minute interview. And then you have an archival piece with a bunch of interviews from a lot of cast and crew. You have basically an hour documentary just featuring a ton of interviews from everyone. You have even another archival piece about adapting the movie and the book and that. So, that's its own little thing. And you even have something from the composer and something covering like where they shot it. And they even talk for 6 minutes about Carrie the musical. And they have TV ads, radio spots, stills, behind the scenes footage, and even like notes from Stephen King included in this release. We talked about how in our Batman episode, for Batman Forever. Batman Forever. How that is like the gold standard of how every release should be. And I think we can put Carrie with that, of just like, man, if every movie got this, I'm not saying they all need every interview under the sun, but if they all got this like attention and care and love in both the movie and the additional features, we wouldn't even need this segment to tell you where to get this stuff.
We need to give like an award to these people for whenever they have like a special Blu-ray or DVD release.
Yes, absolutely. So let me just say, Batman Forever, and Carrie, you get like our prize roll credits platinum award. The number 23, you get a gold star. Beverly Hills Ninja, you get a You Tried star for existing, etc., etc. No, platinum release. 1000%. Can't recommend it enough. So happy we have it now. Especially because this movie, it's very good, isn't it?
Yes.
It is so good. So, interestingly, I believe this movie was released before Gene Siskel and Roger Ebert officially had a TV show. However, Roger Ebert was still reviewing movies, even back then. So we're going to go at the movies at the time to talk about Roger's, a few selected pull quotes that I got from his text review archived on his website, rogerebert.com. And I will give you a few here. He rated it 3.5 stars out of 4. Brian De Palma's Carrie is an absolutely spellbinding horror movie, with a shock at the end that's the best thing along those lines since the shark leapt aboard in Jaws. It's also, and this is what makes it so good, an observant human portrait. Well, what makes the movie's last 20 minutes so riveting is that they grow so relentlessly, so inevitably, out of what's gone before. This isn't a science fiction movie with a tacked-on crisis, but the study of a character we know and understand. When she fully uses or is used by her strange power, we know why. This sort of narrative development hasn't exactly been De Palma's strong point, but here he exhibits a gift for painting personalities. We didn't know De Palma, ordinarily so flashy on the surface, could go so deep. The scariest horror stories, the ones by M.R. James, Edgar Allan Poe, and Oliver Onions, are like this. They develop their horrors out of the people they observe. That happens here too. Does it ever? And so obviously, glowing review. Few things stuck out to me. One, this really is, and we've actually talked about this, this is seen as kind of De Palma's like coming out moment, as it were. Phantom of the Paradise is a movie that we love dearly. Happy 50th anniversary, Phantom of the Paradise. But it's a cult classic. Whereas this, is like one of his big things where people kind of realize like, one, how inventive a director he is, but also, how good he is at actually telling a lot of these human stories. And we've talked about how there's a part of us that wishes he had been able to stick to horror just to make more of what we love.
I think that, between this and Phantom of the Paradise, it really does make me think if he could have been like an early Carpenter.
Yeah.
Funny enough, I don't know if you ever got into reading the Pauline Kael review for this while you were doing kind of like a deep dive into reviews.
I know, but I know that Pauline Kael is a very respected. How did I not?
She actually referenced James Whale for this one. The way she put it, the director James Whale worked sophisticated parody into some of his horror films, such as The Old Dark House, The Bride of Frankenstein. I don't think that before Carrie, anyone had ever done satiric homage to exploitation films. Who but De Palma would think of using old movie trash and even softcore pornos to provide heart for a thriller? Pauline Kael, very famously, much like Roger Ebert, got like a reputation for not liking horror movies. However, she does have a lot of positive things to say for Carrie and also for De Palma's work.
So there's something I want to bring up. De Palma is mentioned, but at no point is Stephen King mentioned at all in that Ebert review. Not even in like the full text. And that was something that stuck out to me now, knowing that it was his first novel and first movie adaptation, less so, because, it was a long time before he was known as the master of horror. But isn't it kind of cool to think, like, man, y'all got to see someone literally at the start of his career, and you're, like, doing this glowing review, not even mentioning Stephen King. You're mentioning Edgar Allan Poe and onions before King. Like, what are you doing here?
Literally, think about it this way, right? There's probably about 1 billion reviews of the film Jaws.
Yeah.
About how many of them are actually referencing Peter Benchley, the guy who wrote Jaws, the novel, over like Steven Spielberg? Maybe 1%, perhaps, but, Steven kind of owns Jaws in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is people saw this as De Palma sort of owning Carrie.
Yeah. It is really funny that is kind of the perception right in the beginning when Stephen King movies are about to become like unquestionably Stephen King movies. Shall we get to talking about it?
Yes, please.
Okay. Because I want to tell you about the first thing that I noticed when we watched this movie, which, by the way, we rented it from Amazon Prime. We hadn't owned the disc at the time. So the first thing I noticed is, of course, Pauline Kael. The thing that she noticed was kind of the opening scene. Much more of a softcore scene than I was expecting.
Well, before that, technically the first scene is a volleyball game, and Carrie fails at it pretty badly. She's told to eat shit. Then we get the credits.
And so, in the credits, I want to notice the music. The first thing that really stuck out to me is, I'm going into this having some knowledge of some Stephen King movies that are to come. So, maybe I'll be proven wrong in the future. But the big thing is that I've noticed in all of them is that they kind of have a soundtrack, like a really ostentatious soundtrack. Almost all of them. And you can say that maybe it was the era of the time, but that was the big thing. So 2 years ago, we did a lineup of films. We do a horror marathon every year, of course. Kingtober was what we did for 2022. And so I was going from like Needful Things in the Dark Half and Pet Sematary, noticing kind of just Misery, noticing kind of this how they all really have this sort of, I'm not sure how to explain it. John Williams score. I don't know. They have a very specific sort of like way they soundtrack the movies. And I have to wonder if this is where it starts, because it's swelling and kind of dreamlike and a little bit, there's some bombast to it. So that was the first thing I noticed. Maybe that's just me, but I'm interested to see where things go from there. But in general, the entire like opening scene is very hazy, and I think it's intentionally so to kind of draw you into thinking you're watching a very different film than you're going to.
Rated from 1 to 10 on the level of I made this scene because I'm horny.
I mean, listen, I was not expecting full frontal nudity in this movie. I had forgotten the full frontal nudity, but I do think that there is the contrast there. You know, yes, it was there. It was absolutely a horny scene, but I also think it's there to be the contrast to be, you know, what eventually happens in the scene with Carrie and her first period and the bullying and like how kind of nightmarish it gets. I think that's kind of the point, is it goes from dream to nightmare.
Yeah. I think there is a lot of elements in the first half of the movie, I should say, that is straight up just coming of age type stuff that was pretty common at the time. So, that definitely plays into it. Was there a certain name among the actors that caught your eye this time?
Well, I mean, for me personally, Sissy Spacek herself was a big one because we had pretty recently actually watched a very good movie with her in a really great role. That is The Straight Story, David Lynch's The Straight Story, which was a very, very, very pleasant surprise. Which, absolutely don't treat it as a dark horse in Lynch's filmography. That movie's awesome. But yeah, cause that was the last thing that I remember her from was, that because she plays just an excellent role in that as the, kind of developmentally delayed daughter of Mr. Straight. Forgotten his first name already, but yeah, so it's kind of cool seeing her pop up, and that was fun.
For me, I always forget that John Travolta is in this movie.
Okay, yeah, okay, fair enough. Didn't we both, like, John Travolta's name popped up and we were like, John Travolta?
Are you sure? And then it's like, yeah, he's actually like a pretty major character.
Yeah, he's a bigger role than you remember. Than we remembered, at least.
One of the lead kind of like bully characters. Huh. Yeah, just kind of like cool to see him, especially at like such a young age. He's such a baby in this movie.
Yeah, very, very fresh-faced.
And you mentioned it earlier. The screenwriter is Lawrence D. Cohen, which is actually if Larry Cohen had the will of the D. Now, shower scene. Of course, that ends with Carrie getting her first period. Mm-hmm. And I'd say this movie is sort of like half of a torture film in some ways, like kind of like a mix between a coming of age movie and then like also a torture film.
That makes sense because growing up is torture.
High school is the torture.
Yeah, the torture is your coach coming in while you're having an autistic meltdown and slapping you.
But if you don't agree, at the very least, like this first scene is just as terrible as Stephen King imagined, I think.
Oh, absolutely.
Her just like running at the other kids. She's panicking. She is just laughed at immediately.
Oh, it's horrible.
They all just basically pummel her right back into the shower as she kind of just falls down. It is just like insane. And also, you see this happen in real life, unfortunately. Mm-hmm. Kind of the people getting caught up in this mob mentality of, oh, haha, this is funny, everybody, let's go ahead and just make fun of this.
Oh, absolutely. And it's, I was bullied in middle and high school. Middle school is funny because, like, I know I was bullied, but I don't really remember being bullied. But recently I received a Facebook message from someone who was like, hey, I knew you in middle school. Sorry that everyone bullied you. And I was like, everyone bullied me? But high school, by the time I reached high school, I could like recognize that I was absolutely bullied. Maybe not quite this bad, but definitely had a few days where I came home from school kind of crying and wishing that we could move. Miserable stuff. But so I could really kind of relate to this scene in that, which is nice. It's terrible to watch, but I do think that, such a frank depiction of the cruelty of high school is great. And not just the cruelty of the children, but everyone involved in Carrie's life kind of sucks. Even the cool ones.
Yeah.
Which I kind of love.
I've had some run-ins with bullies. I haven't let them get me down. All things considered,
Yeah, we turned out okay.
Eventually, I got to adulthood. I got out of kind of the area where I was at. So I've always felt pretty okay about myself since.
Oh yeah, I think our life turned out pretty good.
But let's address the elephant in the room. Carrie covers her ears when there's loud noises. She doesn't really make any eye contact with people when she talks to them. This is maybe not, traits that majority of people would notice, but I'm sure you and I both noticed this. Carrie is autistic.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, there's not a doubt. There's not a doubt in my mind, especially seeing how Sissy Spacek would in the future be in the Straight story, like that she gets it and is probably channeling a lot of these kind of traits intentionally.
And all things considered, I think that this is actually a very nuanced kind of portrayal. Like this is different from the Rain Man and all that kind of stuff, because I feel like your sympathy is always with somebody like Carrie, and it's never like, oh, poor Margaret White, she has to deal with having this kid.
No, absolutely. Like 1000%. Your sympathies are always with Carrie. You completely understand her. And that's like the brilliance of this film is, as Ebert said, and as we'll talk about, this movie is a slow motion domino effect, and it's so good at it. And even in the scene where, you have the coach coming up to try and stop the bullying, her decision is to like, as Carrie is clearly like freaking out and melting down in the shower, is to like smack her and tell her to shape up. Like, come on. Even though the coach is cool, she's kind of a jerk. That is, you can say that, oh, it's the 70s, or I don't know, when it's Carrie time period, they didn't know how to handle it back then.
Teaching was definitely different at the time.
Yeah, just a little bit.
As you can see in the following scene, sometimes you could just be the coach and then just like smoke in the principal's office while wearing just like hot pants and a sweat jacket.
Man, we'll bring it back. Let them smoke indoors. Secondhand smoke be damned. No, and that's great because I love / hate the principal's office scene. He keeps calling her Cassie. This is just, it makes my teeth itch. How little they see her. Like, that's the thing. And this is like something that's going to happen throughout the entire movie, is just how much Carrie is just not seen as Carrie.
Even when people are being nice to her, it's in like the most ableist way possible.
Yeah. Or it's she's, oh, you're Carrie White. The concept, not Carrie the person. And, she is so many things to so many different people. She's Cassie. She's the problem kid that the coach has to deal with, who is sympathetic towards her, but will never truly understand her.
And when the bullies get mad at her, because they bullied her and they get punished for it, they don't get mad at the teachers, they get mad at Carrie for it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. It's like, she's a scapegoat. It's just so cruel, Like, people just don't listen to her. And that sucks. But that's the entire point, is that this entire movie is Carrie screaming for someone to listen to her and no one ever doing it. Outside of a few exceptions that end up getting caught in the crossfire of the eventual conclusion.
So this whole scene with the principal's office, we see like a little bit of her psychic powers come out while she's trying to defend herself in the shower scene. I think it was like the lights going out, if I remember correctly. Mm-hmm. But in the office, there's a part where she yells because the principal keeps calling her Cassie, and she has to correct him every single time. Say it's Carrie. Eventually, at the point where she screams it, her psychic powers sends an ashtray just flipping up in the air, just a perfect 10. I just want to say, made me think of the X-Men movies. How Magneto first showed his powers was while they were in Auschwitz. While reaching out for his parents as he was being dragged away, the gate that they were behind got torn down because Magneto's magnetic strength basically torn apart the gate.
Right. Yeah, powers manifesting in times of great trauma and great stress. It's a very, powerful kind of thing. It's a good little metaphor going. So,
and I know I'm not the first to make this observation, but I do think Carrie would be the perfect fit for the X-Men.
Oh my God, things would be so different if she was just in Professor X's school. Can you imagine?
And I wanted to bring this up. This got me thinking. So I wondered, just who would you put on a 5-person superhero team just made up entirely of horror characters? Just any character, doesn't have to be a villain, doesn't have to be a hero, but they would have to just be, characters from horror movies.
Okay.
So
we're gonna break our teams down right now. Let's go.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Personally, I would not have Carrie be the leader. I would have her be sort of the youngest member, the Jubilee, still trying to control her powers and overcome her own anxieties. I think that would be very true to how the novel and the movie are, which means we needed an actual leader. And the actual leader I had was Wolf Cop.
Wolf Cop? Okay.
He is a werewolf cop that retains his human mind. And I think he would be absolutely perfect for this, because he could just use, his werewolf strength and then also a gun.
Okay, yeah.
Imagine if Beast was also Captain America.
Yes, love that.
All right. Second in command, only because he's a little more unstable, I have the salary man from Tetsuo the Iron Man.
Okay.
He's a half man, half scrap metal guy with telepathic abilities. The movie also ends on this big shonen battle where you have these two metal humans just zoom across Japan at hyperspeed.
Yep.
So this would have to take place before the end of the movie, technically.
Yeah.
But at the very least, in the whole superpower aesthetic.
Yep.
You do need a true muscle for this team, though, which is why I picked Michael in his T-Rex form from Tammy and the T-Rex.
Okay.
So that is a movie about a teenager who gets his brain put in the body of an animatronic T-Rex by a mad scientist. So we would have an English-speaking mini T-Rex in this group.
Yeah. Very, very, very good stuff. Love Tammy and the T-Rex.
So I think we have a really good dynamic right now, but there is one more. I do think that the group needed some conflict, so I think we do need a bad rebel in this group.
Okay.
And I picked Jennifer Check from Jennifer's Body.
Yes!
So I think of her a little like Raven from Teen Titans. The idea of this man-eating succubus.
Jennifer,
instead of like a demon child.
Eating people.
Yeah, well, she would be the one that she struggles to control. She might have a problem with, eating one or two people, but, I also like it because it would give her and Carrie like a similar relationship to Jennifer and Needy in the movie.
Oh my God, yes.
This is the crossover that I need to see, personally.
Absolutely. I love it because I think every superhero team needs a Guy Yuki from Jet. So that makes a lot of sense. Now, you kind of had, you really thought about your team comp. I did too. I didn't base my team comp on any specific team, but I did 5 and I did kind of figure them out in different roles. So personally, my leader, I think as sort of the kind of, I was a little more X-Men inspired as sort of the Professor X role would be Sister Irene from The Nun 2.
Fuck yes.
As we know, she can do Dark Souls roles. She has, prayer related summons, the communion wine. Like she has, the ability to really see through the mist, as it were. So she's going to be our leader, and we'll have Carrie as sort of her kind of protege that she's, rescued, and, it'll probably be very sweet. Well, of course, it'll probably be a little weird because of Carrie's devout mother, but, we'll work through that. We can go through some religious trauma here. There's something here. Right. So yeah, of course, Carrie, number 2. Now, I think you need someone traditionally heroic, which is why, I did go with the Toxic Avenger.
Hell yes.
Avenger is in Toxie's name. He's a mop-swinging superhero. If you haven't seen the Toxic Avenger, of course, it is about a big nerd janitor who becomes a big superhero and the hero of Tromaville by completely pulping criminals bloodily.
And that was one that, like, as soon as I finished this list, I was thinking, like, oh, well, why didn't I just think of the Toxic Avenger? But, at the same time, I was very happy with my dynamic. I'm very glad that you picked, like, the obvious kind of comic book one.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so, number 4, I think that, like I said, I was very X-Men inspired here. And I think you need kind of a Wolverine style character who's sort of got a little bit like uncontrollable, a little on their own, kind of the loose cannon, but also like, really kind of the vicious sort with a real mean streak. And I was thinking about the Wolfman. I love that you picked Wolf Cop. I went with Gabriel from Malignant, because of the scene. Like, just imagine Gabriel coming out and just slashing the hell out of everyone, like in the jail scene. Like, you can see it in your head, That's like one character they kind of send out when there's like a room full of mooks. They're like, okay, Gabriel, go get him.
That'd be just hilarious. Like, they go ahead and send it. Oh, God, I don't want to spoil Malignant.
Yeah, we don't want to spoil Malignant.
But I'm just imagining, like, this scene where it's like, a platypus? Perry the platypus?
But yeah, so for those who have not seen Malignant, it's a lot of fun. But basically, Gabriel is a character in Malignant who can do a lot of damage very quickly and is very good in a mob fight, and can kill a lot of people. So
I can come out of nowhere.
So kind of the stealth one. And speaking of coming out of nowhere, I felt that I needed to throw a wrench in this one, or perhaps a crowbar. I promise I did not intentionally do this, but in honor of the late and great Tony Todd, rest in peace. My final one, he's the Aberre killer of the team. It's Candyman.
Oh, hell yes.
Because think about it, like mirror powers, and again, not to spoil Candyman if those haven't seen it, you say his name in a mirror a few times, he will come out to get you. I think, he's not going to be a permanent member of the team, but I feel like he's someone who, if there is danger, they will say it, and he will be there to kind of give the last bit of backup that they need. Kind of, Justice League Dark kind of, call into the dark side. Let's summon a demon to get these guys out of here. So that's my team. And, I think we have some good superheroes going on.
Yeah, no, like, I love how we're not even exhaustive with this.
Oh, yeah.
We can do like a crossover with the Guyver.
Yeah. We need the Guyver. We need Ash Williams. But yes.
But yes, hire us. Whoever has the rights to this. Dark Horse, maybe?
Yeah, Dark Horse, can you make it happen, guys? Like, look, we've just given you 2 different great teams, and then you can have them cross over. Trust me on this. Well, the only problem is that Carrie's in both of them. So one of them needs to be Carrie from the remake. The Rage Carrie 2. That's why it's called Carrie 2. She's a second Carrie.
You're telling me you're the Carrie 2?
Oh, man. Whew. So, speaking of religious trauma, man, Piper Laurie is the mother.
Mrs. White is so fucking incredible.
Oh, my God. The scene where she drags Carrie into the closet and shuts her away is horrifying.
So, I mentioned before the 70s really loved their, like, evil mother stories. I think technically, Mommy Dearest was an 80s film.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, that's the kind of thing I'm thinking about. Like, evil family members, evil kind of caretakers and all that. For whatever reason, that was, like, the big kind of hotness of the 70s and 80s. And I get it. Like, what is scarier, really, than, your mother being horrible to you, your child just becoming like a monster. Like, well, my child is the Antichrist. Not to directly say, oh, Rosemary's Baby, but also, the
You
Omen
kind of have
too.
to talk about that, yeah. And then of course, as a mother, I mean, to a child, you look up to your parents for, guidance. So for them to kind of turn on you is terrifying, and upsetting. And, you realize that your parents aren't perfect as you grow older, but I know enough people with truly terrible mothers to know that this is not, an uncommon thing, which sucks. But yeah, if anything, there should be more horrible mothers in movies.
And if there was, like a top 3 for horror scenes in the movie, we really are hit with like 2 of the best ones, like straight out the gate. And then the big one is the finale.
Yes, of course.
This scene here, where she has Carrie, held down to recite Bible verses at Carrie.
And chick tracts, basically.
Yeah. She says, she makes Carrie admit that Eve was weak for giving in. She's very self-hating, and also hates her like husband or former husband.
Yeah. And, you learn more about that, near the end of the movie. But it's yet another it's another thing that shows how no one sees Carrie for who she is or as she is, because to everyone she's something else and she's never Carrie. To her mother, she's a burden, basically. Even though she's sweet, she's nice. There's nothing wrong with her.
It's a realistic evil, I would say.
It really is.
Just like constantly talking over her, locking up her daughter. It's the kind of stuff that you hear stories about, and it just, terrifies you to your soul. That's the thing that King is really channeling with
Absolutely. And, of course, again, very, very common, especially with, neurodivergent and autistic children, for, the mothers to see them as just a burden and toss them in the closet and, try and medicate the hell out of them, or conversion therapy or anything, it's fucking terrible.
I will say also, the musical version of this scene, I actually listened to the musical soundtrack like a couple of weeks before we had decided on the theme, or we were invited to go see the musical, just because I heard of Carrie the Musical's reputation. This scene in the musical, it's probably the best song, and apparently it existed even in like the first rendition of Carrie the Musical.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to seeing that performed live, that's for sure.
So, once she's freed from the closet, we do see that Mrs. White is on her white rotary sewing machine. I thought this might have been some kind of like a little bit of lore reference, like, oh, maybe this was like a sewing machine family that they are a part of. No, it's a real model.
The sewing machine empire, hidden Carrie lore, game theory.
And then she basically goes to bed right after that.
Now, this is around where they're showing that the coach is disciplining the bullies. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. I know because I have a note here that just says the coach has hands, put her in the fighting game. I'm not sure what fighting game I meant when I wrote that down, because this isn't Joel versus John. I guess we always talk about like Terrordrome and horror movie fighting games. That's a constant subject from around our house, is we're always talking about who we want to see in a horror movie fighting game, just because it's fun. So I don't think the coach would fit, but it would be pretty funny.
We know our passions.
Yes.
One thing I'll say is that I don't really think I give enough attention to the side characters in this movie, or at least I've never felt like I really recognized them much by name as much as I did like Carrie and Margaret.
Right.
So if you had asked me what the leader of the bullies were before, like a few weeks ago when I was listening to the musical, I would not have been able to tell you, oh, the bully leader is a girl by the name of Chris. She is sort of the quote-unquote main antagonist
right.
of like the school life type of thing.
Yeah. I can tell you there's John Travolta is in the movie now. I don't know his character's name.
Yeah, and that was Chris, and that's Chris's boyfriend in it. She's part of the gang that just writes stuff like Carrie eats shit on the gym wall, just because they're mad that they're getting punished for it. This does actually musical sequence. Yeah, you can definitely tell this is our first 70s movie that we watched. It's such a weird kind of musical sequence.
They played Heat Wave, like the song Heat Wave. I was popping off because I love that song. But yeah, it's really funny watching a movie where it's just an extended music video or sequence set to music, especially popular music. And I mean, I would not go against this at all. And it is fun because we actually, shortly after watching Carrie, actually, it put us in the mood to watch Phantom of the Paradise. So we had a Brian De Palma double feature, which was a blast, by the way. And you can really tell his signatures in both movies. You can tell the same guy made both movies. Now, this isn't a De Palma podcast. This isn't a De Palma arc, so we're not really going to go into that. But I just think that was just kind of a fun little thing where this musical sequence is straight up out of like something like Phantom.
You know, this is really everything I love about the 70s in a way. I would say this is one of the things that like dates the movie, but also I love how more freeform like a 70s film can be, where they would have these kinds of things. Meanwhile, you know, a few years later, we get like Halloween followed by like the 80s, and I feel like everything gets a little more tightly cut.
Yeah, absolutely. 70s movies really have room to breathe and be really different, really, really kind of laid back in a lot of ways. And that can make for some fascinating films. The movie that I always go to when I think about how much I love 70s movies is Night Moves. Because that movie knows how to really take its time, and it also kind of functions as a farewell to the silent film or farewell to the noir era.
It might just be the horror fan in me, but the two that always come to mind when I think of 70s cinema are Texas Chainsaw Massacre and then Dawn of the Dead. You look at the original Texas Chainsaw Massacre, it takes them a while to get to that farm.
Oh, man, that was the coolest thing about watching it. We watched it this October with our friends who, a lot of them, in fact, I don't think any of them had seen it before.
No.
And so we were able to show them it for the first time, and they loved how slow the build was and how Franklin and the atmosphere. And yeah, that's just the coolest thing about 70s movies is, you know, they allow you to bask in the atmosphere in ways that the more kinetic movies that would follow just don't.
You can tell how many filmmakers afterwards are kind of influenced by that point of no return. Eli Roth, Ty West, kind of like a lot more modern people. But they all have that point where they get to the farm and then everything just moves at like rapid fire.
So speaking of movies, it's around this point that Sue Snell and Tommy are meeting up, and Sue gets the idea to get Tommy to invite Carrie to prom. I remember while I was watching this, it definitely doesn't seem as though it's an altruistic thing.
No, it's what's the term for this? Like kind of like this is a little ableist.
Yeah, very self-indulgent on Sue's part. Very look how good I am by doing this for the little autistic girl. But at the same time, so during that scene, as they're talking about this, there's a movie on the TV. And I remember while I was watching, James Garner's name pops up. And I start like frantically Googling. And I found out that the movie on TV that they are watching is 1966's Duel at Diablo. So you're welcome.
We're going to do the roll credits on James Garner, and then this is all going to come back.
Think of this. It's foreshadowing.
It is like a character study for the bullies in a lot of ways, but I guess, you know, that makes sense a lot knowing more about Stephen King.
Yeah.
And how he struggled to kind of relate to Carrie, at least in the start of it, because once you start following the bullies a lot more, you kind of understand it. Like, I don't really care for Carrie much myself. He's thinking as he's just writing for the bullies, but that allows him to kind of get cruel, get to see kind of their side.
Yeah.
For it.
But at the same time, I also think that this is like what it's doing is it's building up your dramatic irony. You are watching the world's slowest car crash that is going to happen, and you cannot stop it. And it's, like everyone always says about the movie, it's something where every little part builds up to the eventual climax. And I think that's something that always fascinated Stephen King, because we mentioned Rage earlier, which has actually been out of publication for a while, I think.
For a good reason.
Yeah, because it's about a school shooting. But I think that in a lot of senses, this is something that has interested Stephen King, is like, what is the cause of like, what builds and makes someone even want to act out in that way? A lot to think about, And I think that that's what this movie and the original story are both interested in exploring. And that's why staying so much with the bullies is so important to the story of Carrie. I mean, the movie isn't called Chris, It's all about what they are doing to Carrie.
Correct? Nah, I was thinking like, maybe they should do like a prequel on Chris, but actually be pretty boring.
Yeah.
I just bullied people.
I bully people. I'm terrible.
I never get my comeuppance, and that's the move. That's the book.
Now I want to talk about something funny that happened during this. Having a swear at the.
It was weird because she kind of like. It seems like she's moving her mouth, but just like nothing comes out of it.
Yeah. So we thought it was censored, but because she doesn't say the word ass, but it's not. However, there is an alternate take, like an alternate version of this movie that was shown on TV, where there are major forms of censorship. The big one is, of course, in the opening locker room scene. They can't show full frontal nudity on television. But basically they used alternate takes where the people changing, like the girls changing, are in their underwear, and the music is, quote, hastily edited, and dialogue involving swearing is of course censored or looped. The oral sex scene, which we also forgot about. There is an oral sex scene in this movie. Thank you, John Travolta. Is also cut. So there you go. Those are some things that are cut from an actual censored made-for-TV version, which, as far as I know, is pretty lost nowadays.
Did you catch the name of the high school, by the way?
No, I didn't.
It's Bates High School.
Ha!
As in... Norman Bates.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's really
from
fun.
Psycho.
Okay.
Is it just like a direct reference to Alfred Hitchcock? This was probably one of the most popular horror movies at the time. Kind of funny considering, how often you'd find 80s movies where they just name characters after like, this character is something Myers. We're going to name like...
Oh, yeah.
These
are Mr. Raimi. Speaking of... If we want to do a retroactive one, this is definitely not a reference, but just something I thought was funny. Next to Carrie's house, there's a house for sale by Paxton Realty, except for some reason the sign says Paxton Reality. So I guess they misspelled that one. But that made me laugh because whenever I think of Paxton, I think of Bill Paxton in Near Dark. So, that's obviously not a reference because that movie came out 10 years later. But I just thought it was funny.
So as we get back to the high school, we get to see more of the bullies. There's sort of this plan happening in the background at this point. We see as they go ahead and go to a pig farm so they can drain pigs of blood.
It's so weird looking. The entire pig farm is so weird looking because there's like all these fake like paintings and murals and stuff. Like, it's so strange.
Man, is this what the farmers had time to do?
Yeah, like, is this what y'all are just...
Is one of the bullies saying, get her done?
God, yes! That was the thing. They go, get her done.
Which I did not realize was a thing before Larry. That said, I do love the slight kind of southern twang the cast has in this story.
Mm-hmm.
Definitely not a Castle Rock, Maine thing, I think.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Carrie is very thickly accented, which I enjoy. And speaking of the bullies and this whole plan, this whole plan is going to happen at the senior prom, And I just find it fascinating how throughout this whole thing, they're just so insistent on how senior prom is going to be the biggest night of your life. And they can't miss senior prom. They have milestones. This is the only time they're ever going to go to this milestone.
We can't punish these people. We have, this is a football player. They have a big game for, our high school or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. And it's never actually about personal accountability. It's all about well, what will happen to the school's reputation? And that's just how it is. And once again, this really is a story about how many ways this could have been stopped 6 ways from Sunday, and it never is.
I think if there's one tagline that you could attach to Carrie, it's just, it could have been prevented.
Yeah, absolutely. So the dinner scene with the Last Supper painting in the background of the White household. Absolutely incredible set dressing. Incredible scene. The dark house, the stormy night. Horror movies after this owe so much to this scene. Now, I'm not saying a dinner table argument is necessarily an uncommon thing, but look at Hereditary. Look at Pearl. They are directly biting this off. I'm not just seeing this, right?
No, that said, this is also just a very good artistic scene, in many ways, because I love the symbolism of it. This is literally going to be the final dinner for Carrie White and her mother before everything. And then, also, you have to think, not to get too far ahead, who was, next to each other, during the Last Supper, you had Jesus and you had Judas there.
Yeah, of course. It's the Last Supper before the betrayal. That is the point. That is why it's the Last Supper, because it is the Last Supper that all the apostles were able to have together before Judas sells Jesus out and leads to his crucifixion.
Fucking brilliant.
Yeah, think about this. You have the school selling Carrie out. You have, Carrie's mother, well, as we'll find out, getting crucified. It is everything all in this one scene, all through the use of the Last Supper. Before, I'm not saying the use of the Last Supper was ever not a little overblown, but before it was used in Murder in the Orient Express. Or more hilariously in Bottoms.
We need to give De Palma roll credits one day, just so we can see the different fucking shot composition as he goes to from movie to movie.
Absolutely. God, this is gorgeous. And also this is around the time where one of the most powerful lines in the movie from Carrie herself, where she says, all the kids think I'm funny. I don't want to be funny. I want to be normal.
Oh.
Yeah. Hell of a line. God, if someone just accepted her. Sorry, it's really getting to me all over again. But yeah.
Literally, the mother does everything she can to try and get Carrie to stop going to the prom.
Yeah, there's no winning, because it's either she stays home with her mother, who fucking hates her and is going to abuse the hell out of her, or she goes to prom, where we all know she's going to get dunked on. It's
And I'll be honest, man, at least up until this point, yeah, you can say from here onward, I don't feel as though Carrie's use of her psychic powers is ever truly malicious.
Yeah.
The most she does, I think, is just kind of she uses it to push down her mother on a bed at one point. Not hurt her or kill her.
Yeah.
Just,
regain a little bit of
power. She has full control of her psychic abilities at this point.
Mm-hmm. So I want to, before we go into the prom, because we're rolling up on prom.
Yes.
Let's talk about the suit buying scene. What a weird scene, right?
It's a little bit of comedic,
Yeah, basically
comedic relief.
Yeah, for those who haven't seen it, there's a scene where the high school bullies go and buy their prom suits and they get in an argument, and the argument gets sped up, like as they're just trying on suits and stuff, and it's like just a pure comedy bit, like a silent movie comedy bit. And it's interesting because it's like humanizing them in a really terrible way. And I think that is so important to the heart of this film. We need to understand every like character from a human perspective before, or else you could have made this a very easy film, I think. De Palma could have made this an easy film. Stephen King could have made this an easy story. But because he understands, like, to be the bully and, that it is important for you to understand every piece in play here, it does make the eventual climax mean that much more.
I loved just how this movie kind of does kind of like little editing stuff like that. There's a freeness to it that reminds me of Hair.
Oh God, great comparison. Watching this and these movies, and you wonder to yourself, like, why isn't everyone doing this? Why isn't everyone being this interesting with, like, why doesn't everything have all this color? Why? I mean, we'll talk about the prom scene, but the prom scene, why isn't everything bathed in this beautiful light? Why, my God, the way that this camera shoots the prom scene to give you both the most, like, tragically beautiful, probably one of the most tragically beautiful scenes in movie history, where, is the walk down the aisle.
So I'm going to hit you with what I think is the reason why films have kind of leaned away from, a mix of tones, this like very colorful look here. Really, I think that one thing that they were afraid to have after about the 70s is this idea of camp. The label of camp had been given to Carrie by some people, and De Palma doesn't feel as though that has any place in it, but it's definitely something that exists within something like Hair. Some of John Waters' filmography at the time, they all have kind of these vibes where they could go from absolutely horrific to just, a break of reality for something extremely funny, and like all these colorful sets in it.
Yeah, I've always heard camp described as laughter through tears, basically.
Would you not say that's Carrie?
I mean, I think that it's the thing. I don't know, because I think that there's very little laughter in Carrie outside of something like the suit argument. I think Carrie's big thing is more sort of this sense of foreboding of when everything looks fine on the surface, but there's absolutely something bubbling there underneath.
I do think it depends. That is something.
But I did talk about how kind of there is sort of this dark, have a sort of some sad laughter there. So sure.
Pauline Kael, at the time that Carrie could kind of balance comedy and horror in her eyes.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I can absolutely see that for sure. And, I think it is this sort of tonal mishmash, this sort of weird, like, coming-of-age story gone very wrong, plus, the building sense of dread that makes the whole thing come together in the eventual prom scene. One scene, of course, that Roger Ebert brought up in his review is where Carrie and the boy that asked her out to the prom, because that's another sad thing, is that there was a boy who did ask her out to prom, but legitimately meant it. Like, I think they tried to get it to do it as a joke, but he, like, in the end really did enjoy, going out with Carrie. But there's a scene where they're dancing, and it's this beautiful, beautiful conversation. But as they're dancing, the camera is spinning faster and faster as a way to, really kind of unsettle you as the movie's going on. And that's, in general, the prom scene is so good at this.
Tommy is his name.
Mm-hmm.
No, he is not like a bad guy or anything. The whole like reward as they kind of like give her this night as just kind of like a one-off out of like pity, where they're sort of like, are like bad people.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's the same with the teacher. You know, all of them have, I guess, a degree of separation that in the end, you know, they don't quite get to her level in the way that she needs, you know? Like she is begging for someone to understand her and to be there for her in a way that no one really is.
So to me, the prom is always kind of the finale to this movie. And I guess it is still like the third act, but I didn't realize the third act hits a lot earlier than I was really expecting. Exactly the right amount of whimsy and teenage awkwardness before hell breaks loose.
Absolutely. God, the music in this scene is heartbreaking. I actually recall specifically the lyric, if there must be a God, could it be that he's heard me at last? 'Cause like lyrics narrating the entire scene and Carrie's kind of internal feelings as it goes on is just
the scene where they spin around honestly made me want to cry. It was so fucking beautiful.
It really was. You know, it's dizzying. It's beautiful. It's unbearable. You want it to last. Like you are begging for it to last, even though you know the other shoe is going to drop. And it sucks.
It's said that it's always darkest before the dawn.
Yeah.
And then I think the opposite is true. Where, you know, the easiest way to get straight into horror is by presenting you the high highs and then immediately dropping you into the low lows. And you can see this done perfectly with Carrie. Carrie winning prom queen is something that's a lot more drawn out than I really remembered it being.
And it's maybe one of my favorite scenes in the movie. And when I mentioned earlier that there's like a scene that is just frankly one of the most heartbreaking bits of dramatic irony I think I've ever seen in a movie. It is unbearable, this tension. 'Cause the way that like Carrie and Tommy are announced as
King
and Queen. Like the way that before it pans over to them, you see the bucket of pig's blood on the rafters.
Oh yeah, like they have some great shots, like the music telegraphs it because, you know, you get a juxtaposition there. There's this, the happy moments with Carrie, and then there's like horror music as whenever we see like what's about to happen. Sue, like realizing this and trying to like stop them becomes a major plot point in the span of this, like, I want to say like 5-minute sequence probably.
Yeah. And you get the saddest, like, I would argue that Carrie's walk up to the stage is the saddest moment in horror history. Like you can put this in a tournament of saddest scenes in horror of just the way that Carrie is glowing.
So Sue is suspected of, it seems like she's going to start something, at least to the teacher's eyes. The same teacher who has been helping Carrie the entire movie sees Sue go under the stage to try and stop Chris from doing this.
Like the bucket wasn't going to fall.
But the teacher goes ahead and grabs Sue, takes her straight out of prom and kicks her out just as, we hit the perfect moment
in what is the most iconic visual and iconic scene. But this scene wouldn't be so good if it wasn't for everything going up to it. But I want to mention something that, I mean, her hearing her mother like echoing in her face of just like, they'll all laugh at you.
It's all a nightmare sequence, isn't it, Vic?
Yeah.
Everything becomes distorted. She only sees kind of glimpses into the crowd as she's like specifically pinpointing the faces that are all just like actively laughing there. There's slow down.
You don't even hear any music, like literally, other than like, you don't even hear the laughter after a certain point. It's literally just the sound of the dripping blood, and it is disgusting.
And it's hard to tell exactly how much of it is what she's seeing and what she's actually feeling.
Yeah.
But the way that her head just like tilts back in kind of shock as she's processing all this. Her face just, mouth agape like it was in the shower, scared. Before, we get the turn.
Mm-hmm.
The way, if there was any doubts about Sissy Spacek's casting, there was absolutely none once this scene hits. The way that her face just completely transforms.
Oh my God.
As she is just standing completely still, straight-faced, eyes are popping out of her face, her skull.
Yeah.
It is absolutely the perfect transformation.
Yeah, it's incredible. The eyes thing is so big because she spends the whole movie like avoiding eye contact, like hiding behind her hair, trying not to, look at people, talk to people too much. This is the first time like she gets the full, like wide-eyed expression. I have a joke. She gets the autism stare. And, good for her.
And, I mentioned Stephen King. I don't really feel like he nails the endings. Here, the prom scene is pure perfection.
Oh,
her closing all the doors just by staring.
Oh my God. The editing is incredible here because of just, one, there's this split screen thing going on. There's like the colors, but there's like the way that it can act, like Carrie does so little in this scene in terms of like actual like moving in action, right? But the way it's edited is just like, exactly what's going on in this scene with just a flick of like her eyes or a flick of her head. You're seeing like, oh, it's the doors. She's doing this. And so much is happening as everyone realizes that they are fucked. And it is like, it is brilliant direction. Like,
water's on the floor. Electricity is setting it on fire.
Yeah.
It is, like perfection.
No one edits like this.
Convince you that this is a physical space.
Yes, exactly. There's stuff happening and you are seeing all these different like perspectives of this happening in this split screen view as Carrie is like making this entire prom just, burn in hell. And it's absolutely incredible. And I remember one thought that came to me as I was doing this is in Metal Gear Solid 4, there's a split screen fight where on one side Raiden and Vamp are fighting, and in the other side you're playing, and Snake is blowing up the geckos. And I have to wonder, like, I know that Kojima wanted to do a split screen fight for a while, but I have to wonder if this was one of his inspirations because it's awesome.
To do a more iconic explanation for this, for people who may have seen this but not Carrie, this is the Red Wedding sequence from Game of Thrones. Insanely heartbreaking, and so much is happening at once. Mm-hmm. They managed to put a lot of pieces together. They do kill off everybody but Sue.
Yeah, even the coach.
Chris and her boyfriend managed to get away.
Right.
But
the
like
coach
everybody
gets
else,
crushed
including
by the
the
basketball or the scoreboard, I think it was.
Yeah, it was like they really go all out to just kill every other character that we've seen so far, mm-hmm. and also like hundreds more who are all just like all caught up in this.
Yeah, it's incredible. It's incredible, and like it's a spectacle in a way that I don't think anyone else would have made it, and the movie is so beautiful at this time, like just the way it uses color and lighting in every scene.
And there's an argument that they could have probably wrapped up every single plot line with the prom, but I think it's a lot stronger because it doesn't end here.
Yes.
So immediately following this, Carrie leaves the prom. She does run into Chris and her boyfriend. They try and run Carrie over.
Yeah. And there's just this brief flash of Carrie's eyes, which is incredible. I'm sorry. Like, I just want to say, like, it is incredible that just with all you need is like a quick zoom into her eyes and then you know exactly what's happening. It's like action without action, and it is so dynamic.
She forces the car to swerve around, then flip over, blowing up and killing both Chris and John Travolta's character.
Yes, absolutely.
Well, less than $2 million budget, by the way.
Like, yeah, it's like the way that they do so much with so little is astounding. It is so creative.
And as she gets out, she starts to go to bed, she does actually see her mother.
Yeah.
Her mother goes to hold Carrie and console her.
Carrie's just begging for consolation at this point.
Ms. White, cries and tells Carrie she should have killed herself while she was pregnant with her.
God, it's horrible because like all Carrie wants is just some actual comfort, and even at her absolute lowest, her mother does not care.
And right before she stabs Carrie, she says the phrase, "Sin never dies."
A literal backstabber.
Holy hell.
Yeah.
Carrie, so we get Carrie falling down the steps as Miss White comes to finish the job. Carrie defends herself with her psychic powers by sending all the knives in the kitchen to just pin her mother in a manner reminiscent to Christ effigy.
Yeah, exactly.
That is in the house.
Yeah, the Christ effigy in the closet, like straight up the arrows in the sides, the stigmata, crucified.
And having now killed everyone, Carrie's powers really go off as the house starts to fall down. With Carrie and her dead mother there, she takes her mom and heads into the closet where Mrs. White would, imprison her daughter.
It's something I've always thought about, with the house collapse and how it just happens. And I think a lot of it is just sort of, there's a bit of symbolism there, and, it is her powers, basically, collapsing in on herself after everything. But I think she goes to the closet is interesting because you think about it as sort of like a sanctuary or a safe space, this enclosed kind of dark area where she can hide, whether it's from guilt or whether it's just from, because that's where she would always, I think, symbolism going back into sort of, being unborn.
It's fascinating. You kind of just see it as the house sort of collapsing, like a suicide at that point.
Yeah, absolutely. At this point, it's sort of kind of crumbling everything. Yeah, as Carrie sort of goes to where she felt safe, I suppose.
This moment where she has every single part of her life has just died at this point. She doesn't care anymore. She ends everything.
And
I think, given the symbolism, not just with people who are bullied, but even people who get revenge on their bullies, like school shooters, for example. Usually at the end of that, what they typically do is kill themselves in it, because they're not thinking about their life after they accomplish this. They just want the people who have made them suffer get what in their mind is comeuppance.
Right.
And then they just basically take their life afterwards.
Right.
It's extremely sad. But
it really is. It's a tragedy. And it's, Carrie is exhausted, and it's sad. And what's even sadder in this sort of bitter irony is, even after all this, it's never about Carrie, because it's always oh, but our poor children, they had their future taken away,
On the rubble, we get a cutaway as we see Sue, the one survivor of this whole massacre, laying flowers on Carrie's memory. Sue is up from a nightmare, traumatized! That wasn't too loud, was it?
No, it's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Man, fantastic way to end the movie, I think. Just one final last major scare.
And you'll always be haunted by her.
Yes.
And that's the thing, is you hear the parents talking about Sue, about, it's so sad that all those kids died and that Sue, she's going to have to change schools and all this stuff. But it's don't worry, she'll forget about Carrie, you know, and it's like, no, you won't. Did to her what you all did to her in you. And I think that's interesting.
You're going to carry that weight.
You're going to carry that weight. That's a stupid joke. Also, I just want to say it's very funny that this is a multi-time Academy Award nominee. When, you know, we know that the Academy has famously not been very kind to horror in the past. So
this was before the stigma.
Yeah.
I want to say. I'd say like it was probably after the slasher movie boom, where everything just
they really started hating horror.
Yes. Overall, I'd say this movie just really gets better on rewatch.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
I've watched this movie a few times. This was the one that, you know, finally convinced me, no, this is actually one of Stephen King's best. I do think it's a little dated at points. For example, those musical sequences, fun as they are, I don't think some of this stuff was really necessary, truth be told, but I still think this is probably as perfect of an adaptation as maybe they could have gotten. There is a few key differences from the novel. Do you want to get into them?
The big one is Carrie in the novel is actually meant to be fat or, you know, overweight, plump, whatever you want to call it, which is why they use pig's blood. You heard that Mike Flanagan's going to be doing a series, like a Carrie series for Netflix, right?
Yes.
If you're going to do another reimagining after we've already had like various remakes and sequels and whatever, you probably just at least want to do Fat Carrie, right? Like in 2024. You know, and this is I wouldn't trade Sissy Spacek for the world, but you know, use this as an opportunity to be more book accurate.
There was a few extra sequences as well, I believe, like a few more instances of her using her powers, like her sending rocks tumbling. That just was not going to work with the budget that they had. But that would help this is if they could go more novel accurate. I do actually trust Mike Flanagan for adaptation for Stephen King stuff. We're not going to get into it, but I will say his adaptation of Dr. Sleep. I actually think that one was in many ways like the exact opposite of how I feel about the Shining book, where I appreciate what they did with the Shining movie, but I also feel as though the overall point of the book gets muddled.
Right.
Meanwhile, I think that they added a lot more from the Dr. Sleep novel to the movie, especially if you're watching like the uncut version. Like that is the best way to experience that story. And roll credits. Themes of the original Shining book and Dr. Sleep a little better.
Yeah, so we'll see how it goes. I'm also not. Netflix unfortunately has this thing where they like make you make 8 episodes, and you know, I don't know if the novel needs 8 episodes. You know, I think that the story is perfectly told with plenty of good pacing in 90 minutes. So we'll see.
I will say I also enjoyed a lot more of the impeccable, inexplicable moments, like, you know, Carrie dancing, and everything around them fading away in that sequence.
Oh, it's beautiful.
I hope that we get into more kind of sequences like that as we continue.
Yeah,
like something that the we get to see the director's strong points come out.
Yeah.
Because that's one big thing here is I think we have kind of an all-star cast of directors.
With, you know, fantastical sequences, with, you know, music swelling, with doing a lot with a little. You know, I think we're gonna get some interesting comparisons as we go, and especially I think it'll be cool to see how each director interprets the material.
So, our next movie is going to be Christine. The killer car movie. Is this one going to be less sad than Carrie?
Just a little bit. Carrie, full tragedy. Christine, a yaoi.
one of the saddest yaois I've ever experienced.
It's a tragedy, a tragic yaoi. No, I'm really looking forward to kind of seeing that one too. So thank you, John Carpenter.
So I think we've said all we really got to say on Carrie. I adore it.
Oh yeah, this movie was a surprise. That was the thing that really stuck with me, was just, I kind of feel stupid. What took me so long? You know what I mean? Why didn't I appreciate this movie before? What was wrong with me? I guess, I don't know. I should have been seeing
this movie more for the vibes in the past, and now I feel like I can appreciate it for more than that.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we have an exciting arc coming up. I'm really looking forward to seeing what comes in our future. In the meantime, of course, if you want to track us and follow our podcast, you can go to Spotify or YouTube or armbarstudios.com. We're all over the internet. Again, this has been Aaron, and that has been Mandy.
3, 2, 1. Roll credits.
I really got into Carrie. Of course, it was all in the book. We had Stephen King's wonderful book. That was when I think I first understood how important research is.
Roll Credits is produced by Armbar Studios and is part of the Aaron and Mandy Network. The intro and outro music is provided by Danya Vodovos, available on Bandcamp. For more information on all of our projects, visit armbarstudios.com.